In a quiet village of ancient China, more than 2,000 years ago, a man walked slowly along a dirt road. His robe was plain, his steps unhurried, and yet his presence carried the weight of centuries. His name was Confucius, known to the world as Confucius. He did not build monuments. He did not conquer lands, and yet his words shaped civilizations. Even now, centuries later, his teachings breathe through the heart of Asia, echo through classrooms in the West, and live in the silent patience of anyone who keeps moving forward. Despite the odds among his many lessons, one line continues to whisper through time. It does not matter how slowly you go as long as you do not stop. It is not loud. It does not promise glory. But it holds a quiet strength, the kind that outlasts kingdoms. Confucius lived in an era of chaos. The late Zhou dynasty, a time when lords waged endless wars and moral order crumbled. He wandered from state to state, not to seek power, but to restore virtue, the heart of society. He believed that greatness was not measured by victory, but by discipline, harmony, and perseverance. In his view, life was not a race to be won, but a journey to be refined, step by patient step. When he said, "It does not matter how slowly you go as long as you do not stop," he was not speaking of motion, but of devotion. He was telling humanity that consistency is divine. That slow progress, guided by integrity, is worth more than 1,000 empty leaps. He knew what it meant to be ignored, misunderstood, and even rejected. Many of his contemporaries dismissed him. They saw a wandering teacher, not a visionary. But Confucius never stopped teaching. He believed that if a man cultivates virtue in himself, he changes his family. If a family lives in virtue, it changes a village. And if a village lives in virtue, it changes the world. So he continued step by step, conversation by conversation, planting seeds he would never see bloom. This is the deeper meaning of his saying. It is not simply about patience. It is about faith. The faith that even the smallest effort matters when aligned with the good. Confucius was not chasing speed because speed belongs to the ego. The ego wants to arrive first. The wise man wants to arrive true. He taught that the way to heaven, the Tao, was not through ambition, but through alignment, through steady moral living, through humility, through persistence in what is right. And so the man who seemed to walk slowly ended up outlasting dynasties. His students carried his ideas across millennia. His teachings shaped governments, ethics, education, even the silent ways people greet each other with respect today. The world forgot the kings who once ignored him, but it remembers the teacher who never stopped walking. If one listens closely, there is something profoundly human in his words. We all begin somewhere uncertain, small, clumsy, unseen. And in those moments when we feel slow, when the world runs ahead, Confucius reminds us that motion is not measured by speed, but by sincerity. To move slowly, but never stop. That is how mountains rise. That is how rivers carve valleys. That is how a seed becomes a tree. Progress, he taught, is a quiet thing. It does not announce itself. It grows in silence, like dawn before light. Centuries later, when modern thinkers read his words, they recognized something familiar. The Stoics, in Greece like Marcus Aurelius, echoed his truth. Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself. They too believed that virtue was a long road, that the man who walks with patience eventually outruns the one who runs with arrogance. Confucius was not merely a philosopher. He was a gardener of the human spirit. He knew that growth takes time and that rushing destroys what patience perfects. His wisdom crossed oceans, traveled through books, temples, and minds, and now it lives quietly inside every person who refuses to give up, even when the world tells them they are too slow, too late, too small. The story of Confucius is not the story of a hero who rose quickly. It is the story of a man who walked slowly and arrived everywhere. He reminds us that persistence is not only endurance, it is love. Love for truth, love for the process, love for what one becomes while walking. His life tells us you don't need to move fast to matter. You only need to move faithfully, because in the quiet rhythm of consistent steps, character is built, wisdom matures, and destiny unfolds. And so, if one day you find yourself feeling behind, if the world seems to run while you crawl, remember the teacher who walked through ancient dust with nothing but hope, humility, and courage. He never rushed. He never stopped. And 2,000 years later, his footsteps still echo, steady, gentle, unbroken. It does not matter how slowly you go as long as you do not stop. There is a quiet strength in the word perseverance. It does not roar. It does not demand attention. It simply endures, like a mountain under the wind, or a river that carves its way through stone, drop by drop, century after century. Confucius understood this quiet strength. To him, perseverance was not just an act of endurance, but a reflection of character, a form of integrity that reveals who we truly are when the world stops applauding. He lived in an age of instability, and every step he took was a test of faith. He was rejected by kings, misunderstood by scholars, and followed by only a handful of loyal students. But he never stopped teaching. He never stopped walking. He believed that greatness is not born from talent or chance, but from the quiet repetition of good acts, day after day, even when no one is watching. Confucius once said, "The man who moves a mountain begins by carrying away small stones." That is perseverance, the art of doing something small faithfully until it becomes something vast. To persevere is not to be fast. It is to be faithful. Faithful to the process, faithful to one's values, faithful to the rhythm of life itself. We often think perseverance is hard, but in truth, it is natural. Nature itself is patient. A seed does not rush to become a tree. The tide does not hurry to reach the shore. The sun does not rise out of impatience, and yet everything unfolds perfectly in time. Perseverance, then, is not struggle. It is harmony with time. It is the wisdom of knowing that all things ripen slowly. When Confucius spoke of not stopping, he was teaching a way of being, not just a strategy for success. He knew that the world tests us not with great battles, but with the slow erosion of doubt. The challenge is not the mountain ahead, but the whisper that says, "You're not moving fast enough." That whisper lives inside everyone. In the student who studies but still fails, in the artist who paints but remains unseen, in the worker who tries but feels unnoticed. To them, Confucius speaks across the centuries. It does not matter how slowly you go, as long as you do not stop. Because the path of truth is not measured by speed but by continuity, the refusal to abandon what matters, even when it feels invisible. True perseverance is spiritual. It begins in silence, and it grows in solitude. It asks no applause, no recognition. It is not glamorous, but it is sacred. It is the force that keeps a mother working late to feed her child, the artist painting through rejections, the farmer tending the soil through storms, the elder who keeps smiling despite the weight of years. These are not grand gestures. They are quiet acts of faith, and they hold the same essence Confucius once taught. In today's world, perseverance feels rare. People want results, not rhythm. They want the fruit, not the growth. They rush to become someone, forgetting that being someone is not a destination, but a direction. We live in a time where stopping feels easier than continuing, because continuing requires patience, and patience requires trust. But if we listen to Confucius, we find that perseverance is not a burden, it is a blessing. To keep walking, even slowly, means you are still alive, still reaching, still becoming. Every step, no matter how small, is a declaration. I have not given up. And in that quiet statement lies the entire philosophy of life. Imagine Confucius walking through the plains of ancient China. His students tired, the road long, the sun fading. Someone asks, "Master, how far is the journey?" And he replies softly, "It does not matter as long as we do not stop." That simple answer carries the wisdom of centuries. He was not promising arrival, he was promising meaning, because to walk with purpose, even without certainty, is to live with dignity. The slow traveler sees more than the one who runs. He feels the earth under his feet. He hears the wind, the birds, the silence. He understands that progress is not the distance covered, but the depth gained. That is perseverance, not movement for the sake of moving, but movement rooted in awareness. Philosophers through time have echoed this truth. Seneca wrote, "He who is brave is free." Marcus Aurelius said, "If it is endurable, then endure it." And Confucius would have nodded, for to endure with grace is to honor life itself. To persevere is not to resist time, but to move with it. To walk through failure and fatigue, through hope and heartbreak, without losing the will to begin again. It is to say, I will not be perfect today, but I will not give up today. And that, Confucius would say, is enough. Perseverance is the poetry of the humble. It belongs to those who build bridges stone by stone, who raise families through kindness, who keep faith when the world is cold. It is a quiet rebellion against despair, a gentle defiance against the noise of speed. It is proof that the most powerful act of courage is sometimes just to continue. And so, in a world obsessed with finishing first, Confucius reminds us there is beauty in not stopping, even when you move slowly, even when no one claps. For in each slow step lies the seed of transformation, the seed that one day blooms into a life of meaning. Time is the most silent of all teachers. It never speaks, but it transforms everything. The mountains bow before it, rivers change course, cities rise and fall, and within the heart of every human being, time sculpts patience. Confucius understood time not as an enemy, but as a companion. He did not rush against it, nor resist it. He walked beside it, knowing that wisdom does not bloom under pressure, but under patience. When he said, "It does not matter how slowly you go as long as you do not stop," he was speaking of a sacred partnership between man and time. Progress, he taught, is not about speed. It is about harmony, the rhythm between effort and time, between will and destiny. In the modern world, people often see time as something to conquer. They count days, chase deadlines, measure success in hours. But Confucius saw time as something to cooperate with, a flow to align with, not a foe to fight. He would say, if you move with time, it carries you. If you move against time, it breaks you. For him, time was not the ticking of a clock, it was the unfolding of being. Every breath, every sunrise, every patient step forward, that was time, teaching silently. He believed that those who honor time by working steadily will one day see what others call impossible. Patience, then, is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is the deep understanding that everything has its own season. The farmer knows it. He plants today, waters tomorrow, and waits. The musician knows it. He practices scales for years before melody finds him. The philosopher knows it. He reads, reflects, and waits for meaning to ripen. Even the universe knows it. Stars take millions of years to be born. Light travels centuries to reach us. And yet, not a single moment is wasted. Confucius would say, the path of virtue follows the rhythm of the heavens. Nothing forced lasts. Nothing rushed deepens. Only what grows in its time endures. In patience there is power. It may seem slow, but it builds a foundation that nothing can shake. When you are patient, you are not passive, you are steady. You are giving the universe permission to unfold at its natural pace. Many fail not because they lack talent, but because they lose trust in time. They stop too soon, right before the moment of change. They quit before the dawn. Confucius saw patience as faith that what is good, if nurtured daily, will someday bear fruit. He once said, "Virtue is never alone. It always brings neighbors," meaning patience, goodness, and time always walk together. The danger of modern progress is haste. People want transformation without process. They want clarity without contemplation. They want fruit without roots. But time teaches us that depth cannot be rushed. The deeper the roots, the stronger the tree. The longer the formation, the more lasting the creation. When Confucius spoke of going slowly, he was not praising laziness. He was protecting meaning. He knew that a rushed life is a shallow life, and a shallow life cannot touch truth. The truth reveals itself slowly, like dawn lighting the horizon, like wisdom unfolding in the heart of silence. To Confucius, patience was not a waiting room. It was a sacred space of transformation. He taught his students that delay does not mean denial, that sometimes the universe holds us back, not as punishment, but as preparation. He often said, "He who learns but does not think is lost. He who thinks but does not learn is in danger." Time, to him, was not just duration. It was reflection. Without patience, learning becomes memorizing. Without time, wisdom becomes noise. In every culture, this truth has echoed. The African proverb says, "However long the night, the dawn will break." The Japanese say, "Even dust, when piled up, becomes a mountain." And Confucius would have smiled, for he knew that patience was the bridge between dream and reality. Progress, he would remind us, is rarely visible. It happens quietly beneath the surface. The mind grows when it fails and reflects. The heart strengthens when it forgives. The spirit expands when it endures. Time measures these transformations silently. It doesn't rush. It doesn't praise. It just keeps moving, like a wise teacher who never speaks but always guides. When we stop fearing slowness, we start respecting growth. When we stop fighting time, we start walking with it. Confucius walked slowly, not because he was weak, but because he understood that haste breaks the soul. He believed that meaning grows like music. You cannot hear the beauty of a song if you skip to the end. You must move through every note, every silence, every pause. And so he walked with time, not ahead of it, not behind it, but beside it, as a friend, a teacher, a mirror. It does not matter how slowly you go as long as you do not stop. It is not just a sentence. It is a way of living with time, because time, patience, and progress are not three things. They are one. They are the rhythm of growth, the heartbeat of wisdom, and the pulse of life itself. The modern world worships speed. Everything must move faster. Communication, success, even happiness. We measure life by how quickly we reach something, not by how deeply we live it. And yet, beneath the hum of progress, something has gone missing. We run faster but understand less. We connect more but feel lonelier. We move constantly but rarely arrive. Confucius lived long before the invention of machines or deadlines, but his words pierce directly into our century. It does not matter how slowly you go as long as you do not stop. He saw what the modern world would forget, that speed often deceives and stillness often reveals. Speed gives the illusion of progress. It makes us feel alive, for a moment. But it also steals our ability to see. When we move too fast, we skip the subtle details that give life meaning, the pause before a smile, the silence between two thoughts, the breath before a choice. Confucius would say, "The wise man does not rush, for he knows the path itself is the destination." He understood that speed is seductive. It feels like achievement. but it can be the opposite. It can pull us away from awareness, away from presence, away from the depth that wisdom requires. In the ancient texts, Confucius spoke often of balance, the golden mean between excess and deficiency. He believed that every virtue, when pushed too far, becomes its own opposite. Courage becomes recklessness, ambition becomes greed, and speed, when unbalanced, becomes blindness. To move too fast is to live only on the surface. It is to skim across the waters of life without ever diving in. You see reflections, but never truth. That, Confucius would say, is the tragedy of the hurried soul. He lived slowly, deliberately. Each conversation, each lesson, each pause carried intention. His students once asked, "Master, why do you pause so often before answering?" He smiled and said, "Because words should rest in silence before they meet the air." He was teaching something far greater than language. He was teaching the rhythm of wisdom. For wisdom, like breath, needs space between the inhaling and the exhaling. Without that stillness, all thought collapses into noise. The illusion of speed is that it seems to bring us closer to our goals, but in truth it often brings us closer to exhaustion. It promises efficiency, but delivers emptiness. It gives the comfort of control, but steals the mystery of discovery. Confucius, who walked from state to state for years without being accepted, knew that the journey matters more than the arrival. His teachings were not born from haste, but from reflection. He let time ferment wisdom, the way still water reflects the sky more clearly than a rushing river. If he lived today, Confucius might look around and ask gently, "Why are people in such a hurry to forget themselves?" He would see a world obsessed with achievement, where busy is a badge of honor and silence feels like failure. He would see people scrolling endlessly, searching for peace in the very things that steal it. He would remind us that motion is not meaning, that being busy is not the same as being alive. And he would say again, with a calm smile, "It does not matter how slowly you go, as long as you do not stop." Speed feeds the ego. Patience feeds the spirit. The ego says, "I must arrive now." The spirit says, "I will grow when it's time." Speed wants applause. Patience wants understanding. Speed burns. Patience builds. And when we slow down enough, we realize that life's beauty was never hiding. We were simply moving too fast to notice it. Philosophically, speed belongs to the world of appearances. It dazzles the senses, creates excitement, and disguises emptiness with motion. But the philosopher, unlike Confucius, learns to pierce beyond the surface. He knows that meaning is found not in what moves quickly, but in what endures. A lightning flash is bright, but gone in an instant. A candle burns slower, but lights the night. Speed is light without warmth. Patience is warmth without noise. Confucius's slow pace was not a lack of energy, it was a sign of mastery. He moved at the rhythm of understanding, never faster than his mind could see clearly. He knew that every step taken in awareness is worth more than 1,000 steps taken in confusion. In a world that races blindly, he would have been a steady flame, not dazzling, but constant, because the truth is this: what moves too fast cannot take root, and what has no roots cannot last. Modern philosophers like Alan Watts later echoed this wisdom. You cannot be more alive by moving faster. You can only be more alive by being more aware. This is exactly what Confucius meant centuries earlier. To him, slowing down is not about inactivity. It is about presence. It is about seeing the world not as a blur, but as a tapestry of moments woven together by consciousness. The illusion of speed ends the moment you ask yourself, "What am I rushing toward?" For there is no final destination where peace lives. Permanently. There is only this moment, unfolding, shimmering, enough. Confucius knew it. He lived by it. And his words are still the antidote to a world spinning too fast. It does not matter how slowly you go, as long as you do not stop. In those few words lies the invitation to live again, fully, slowly, deeply, to see that the fastest way to meaning is to stop running from silence. The world often teaches us to measure success by what can be seen, titles, wealth, recognition, applause, but Confucius measured life by something invisible, the quiet growth within the heart. To him, outer success was temporary. Inner growth was eternal. He once said, "To put the world in order, we must first put the nation in order. To put the nation in order, we must first put the family in order. To put the family in order, we must first cultivate our personal life. And to cultivate our personal life, we must first set our hearts right." Every great change, he believed, begins from within. Confucius did not reject material success. He simply understood its place. He knew that gold could buy comfort, but never contentment. Power could move armies, but never hearts. He taught that true progress begins with the invisible, a clear conscience, a kind intention, a calm spirit. Without these, every outer victory becomes hollow. He would have said, "The world outside, you reflects the order within you." And so when he spoke of not stopping, he was not just telling us to keep working, but to keep growing inwardly, even when the world sees nothing changing. In today's world, the hunger for outer success has never been stronger. We are told to make it, to stand out, to win. But in this endless pursuit, many lose their center. People chase fame and forget wisdom. They collect possessions, but lose peace. They rise in status, but fall in spirit. Confucius would look at this modern chaos and gently remind us, a man who has mastered himself has already mastered the world. Inner growth is not visible, but it shapes everything visible. It is what allows a person to hold power without arrogance, to face loss without despair, to act with compassion, even when wronged. That, he believed, is the true success, the one that cannot be taken away. Outer success depends on circumstance, luck, timing, opportunity. But inner growth depends only on choice. Every challenge, every disappointment, every heartbreak is a chance to grow inside, to strengthen patience, deepen empathy, expand awareness. A wise person sees failure not as punishment, but as training for the soul. That is why Confucius said, "The superior man is modest in his speech, but exceeds in his actions," because he understood that greatness is quiet. It grows inside long before the world notices it. To grow inwardly is to cultivate virtue, not as a performance, but as a practice. Confucius taught 5 constants: benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom, and faithfulness. These are not trophies to display, but seeds to water every day. They do not glitter, but they glow from within. A man may lose wealth and still remain rich if he has virtue. He may lose reputation and still remain whole if he has integrity. He may stand alone and yet not feel empty, because his roots are within, not around him. Imagine a tree. Its branches may break in the storm, but as long as the roots hold firm, it lives. Inner growth is those roots. Outer success is the branches. We live in a world that trims and paints its branches, but forgets to water its roots. And so, when the storm comes, everything polished falls apart. Confucius, who walked through rejection and exile, knew that the roots, one's values, humility, and discipline are what allow the spirit to endure. He never sought power, yet his name endured for millennia. Why? Because what grows inside cannot die outside. True legacy, he taught, is not in monuments or money, but in the character we build. And inner growth is the only wealth that multiplies when shared. He might have said, "The wise man builds inward, so that the outer may follow." When you focus only on the outer, you become fragile. You depend on applause, on numbers, on comparison. But when you focus inward, you become free. The man who conquers himself no longer needs to conquer anyone else. That is the paradox of true success. Once you stop chasing it, it begins to find you. So, what does inner growth look like today? It looks like patience in the face of provocation, forgiveness instead of retaliation, reflection instead of reaction. It is choosing silence over anger, understanding over ego. You cannot post it, you cannot measure it, but you can feel it in the stillness that comes when you stop needing to prove yourself. Confucius believed that peace in the world begins with peace in one's heart. That civilization is not built by power, but by self-awareness, and that success without virtue is like a house without a foundation, impressive but hollow. He might have looked upon the world today, its noise, its rush, its craving, and said quietly, "You're all climbing mountains, but few are building souls." True success, he would remind us, is not about reaching higher, but about growing deeper, not about how much we gain, but how much we understand, not about how far we go, but how we walk the path. For the world changes with every moment, but the soul only grows through stillness, and in that stillness you find the quiet joy of becoming. Self-discipline is not punishment. It is freedom, the quiet kind that cannot be given, only earned. Confucius understood this deeply. He lived in a time when kingdoms fell to greed and chaos ruled. And yet, his teachings were not about conquering others, but about conquering oneself. He believed that if a man could master his impulses, he could master his destiny. Because the greatest empire to govern is the one within, he once said, "The superior man is firm in decision, but gentle in manner." It was not about hardness or control, but about balance, a harmony between strength and calm. To Confucius, discipline was not a cage, it was a compass. It didn't restrict life, it gave it direction. Without discipline, the mind scatters like leaves in the wind. With it, the heart becomes still enough to see truth. Self-discipline, he taught, begins in the smallest acts, how we speak, how we think, how we respond. It is built not in the grand moments, but in the quiet choices made when no one is watching. He told his students, to see what is right and not do it is the want of courage. That, he believed, was the test of true character, not in knowing, but in acting rightly, even when it is hard. In the modern world, self-discipline is often misunderstood. People associate it with denial, a life stripped of joy and spontaneity. But to Confucius, discipline was not about restriction, it was about alignment. When the body, the mind, and the spirit move in the same direction, there is no conflict, no confusion, only peace. He would have said, freedom without discipline is chaos. Discipline without freedom is slavery. Harmony lives in the middle. To live without discipline is to live as a leaf in the wind, moved by every emotion, every temptation, every distraction. But to live with discipline is to walk with intention, to move slowly but with clarity. The disciplined person, Confucius believed, is not cold or rigid. He is warm yet unwavering, like a candle flame that bends with the wind but does not go out. He taught that every act of restraint strengthens the soul. When we hold our tongue in anger, we gain power. When we choose patience over impulse, we gain wisdom. When we keep moving despite fatigue, we gain endurance. Discipline, he said, is the practice of being your own master. Because when the mind obeys wisdom instead of desire, it becomes free. He often spoke of Li, propriety, or moral conduct. But Li was more than manners. It was the outer expression of inner order. When a person lives with Li, their behavior reflects self-respect. Their discipline becomes beauty in motion. To Confucius, Li was not about following rules blindly. It was about remembering who you are and acting in a way that honors that truth. He would have told his disciples, "Do not let comfort weaken you. Do not let difficulty harden you." That is the heart of discipline, to remain gentle in strength and strong in gentleness. Because discipline is not the absence of feeling, it is the guidance of it. A disciplined heart does not suppress emotion. It channels it toward purpose. Like a river guided by its banks, emotion guided by discipline becomes life-giving, not destructive. In today's age of constant stimulation, discipline has become rare and precious. The mind that can focus in chaos is a sanctuary in itself. Confucius would say, "The man who controls his mind controls his life." He would look at our world, filled with noise, notifications, and endless cravings, and whisper, "Peace will return when attention returns." Self-discipline for him was sacred. It was not about perfection. It was about persistence, not about denying pleasure, but mastering balance, he would have reminded us. It does not matter how slowly you go, as long as you do not stop. Discipline is that a daily act of quiet return, a coming back to yourself again and again, no matter how many times you wander. The disciplined life is not cold, it is full, because it knows its limits. Like a tree that grows upward only because its roots hold firm, a soul grows free only. When anchored in self-control, freedom without discipline is noise. Discipline without freedom is silence. But together, they become music, and that, Confucius would say, is the sound of a life well lived. Continuity, the quiet persistence of being. It is not the loud victory of the moment, but the steady hum of something that refuses to fade. Confucius understood continuity as the essence of virtue. He believed that goodness is not built in bursts of inspiration, but in the patient rhythm of daily effort. He once said, "Virtue is not left to stand alone. He who practices it will have neighbors," meaning, when you live with consistency, you attract harmony. And when you keep walking, even slowly, life in its own rhythm walks with you. To him, stopping was not a matter of the body, but of the spirit. You could keep moving physically, yet be stagnant within, or you could stand still and yet continue growing quietly in soul. Continuity, therefore, was not about speed or movement. It was about commitment. To continue is to remain faithful to one's purpose, one's values, one's humanity, even when the world changes shape around you. In the Analects, Confucius never promised perfection. He promised direction. He said, "The expectations of life depend upon diligence. The mechanic that would perfect his work must first sharpen his tools. Everyday life gives us tools, but time, thought, will. Continuity is how we sharpen them. It is the slow, sacred art of becoming better without needing to be the best. Modern society worships results. It values outcomes over endurance, achievements over alignment. But Confucius saw something timeless, that life is not a sprint, but a circle, a quiet unfolding that never truly ends. When he said, "Do not stop," he was not urging exhaustion, but reminding us that meaning is found in momentum of the spirit. He would have said, "When you continue, even through silence, you remain alive in truth." Continuity for him was spiritual breathing. Just as the body lives by inhaling and exhaling, the soul lives by striving and resting, but never ceasing. Stopping, in the deepest sense, is when one gives up learning, reflecting, or growing. That is death before death. To continue, even imperfectly, is to stay awake, to honor the mystery of being human. He taught his students that constancy is strength, that greatness comes not from what we do once, but from what we do always. He said, "Is it not a pleasure having learned?" Something to try it out at due intervals. He saw learning not as accumulation, but as continuity, the weaving of insight into experience until understanding becomes nature. In this way, discipline becomes art and effort becomes grace. When the mind commits to continuity, it no longer fears failure, because in the long rhythm of time, failure is not the end. It is a note in the melody. Confucius would say, "Those who walk the path long enough will realize every stumble is still movement forward. To him, the one who continues, no matter how slowly, is already victorious." He lived this philosophy. For years he wandered from state to state, rejected by rulers, misunderstood by scholars. But he never stopped teaching, never stopped learning, never stopped walking. In his persistence, he embodied the very wisdom he preached. That continuity is faith in motion. He once said, "The green reed which bends in the wind is stronger than the mighty oak which breaks in the storm." He knew that endurance, not resistance, is the secret of lasting strength. Continuity is not stubbornness, it is not blind persistence, it is wisdom knowing how to adapt without losing essence. To continue does not mean to repeat, it means to renew, to move forward with awareness, to grow deeper into purpose. Confucius taught that the path of virtue is not linear but circular. We return to the same lessons again and again, but each time with more clarity, more humility, more grace. That is the beauty of continuity. It refines without breaking, teaches without shouting, heals without haste. To live continuously is to accept impermanence, to know that change will come, but our commitment must remain. Just as the river flows but is never the same, the soul evolves yet remains itself. Confucius would have said, "The wise man changes like water, but endures like the mountain." He believed that continuity is what connects wisdom with time. It turns fleeting lessons into living truth. So, when he said, "It does not matter how slowly you go as long as you do not stop," he was not only speaking of persistence, he was describing the pulse of life itself, because to be human is to fall, to rise, to fall again, and to rise higher still. Continuity is not perfection. It is devotion. The devotion to stay awake in a world that sleeps, to stay kind in a world that rushes, to stay true in a world that forgets. That, Confucius would say, is the rhythm of wisdom. Across time and continents, wisdom speaks the same language. In China, Confucius walked with calm dignity, teaching harmony through self-cultivation. In Rome, centuries later, Marcus Aurelius meditated in the stillness of dawn, reminding himself to live in accordance with nature. Both men, though worlds apart, shared one truth. The path to peace lies not in controlling the world, but in mastering oneself. When Confucius said, "It does not matter how slowly you go, as long as you do not stop," he was describing what Stoic centuries later would call virtues. Virtue in motion, the steady practice of becoming whole. For Confucius, life was a moral journey, not about arrival, but alignment. For the Stoics, life was a test of endurance, not about comfort, but character. They both believed that wisdom was not inherited, but earned through patience, reflection, and repetition. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." Confucius would have nodded. He too believed that the outer world is a mirror of the inner state. When the mind is disordered, everything feels chaotic. When the heart is calm, even storms seem gentle. Both taught that control begins within. The Stoic practices detachment. The Confucian practices balance. Different words, same essence. A soul that knows itself cannot be shaken. Seneca once wrote, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." Confucius might have said the same in a gentler tone. He taught that hardship is not misfortune, but instruction, the silent teacher of virtue. When Confucius faced rejection from kings and ministers, he did not curse his fate. He continued teaching, walking, and writing. Like a Stoic emperor, he found peace in purpose. Epictetus, the slave-turned-philosopher, declared, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Confucius would have smiled at that. For his entire philosophy rested on self-mastery, the power to govern one's desires, speech, and actions until they align with moral order. He taught that propriety, was not about social rules, but about inner discipline expressed outwardly, and that when a person lives with integrity, freedom naturally follows. Both East and West, then, discovered the same paradox. Discipline is freedom. Restraint is power. Slowness is strength. The Stoics spoke of logos, the divine reason that orders the universe. Confucius spoke of Tao, the way, the harmony of all things. Different names, same silence behind them. Both saw human beings not as isolated, but as parts of a greater whole, threads in the vast tapestry of existence. To live well, they said, is to flow with this order, not against it. To fight it is to suffer. To align with it is to find peace. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." Confucius said, "The man who moves a mountain begins by carrying away small stones. One commands action, the other teaches patience. But both lead to the same wisdom. Goodness is not a theory. It is practice." If Confucius had walked through the marble streets of Rome and Marcus Aurelius had visited the temples of Lu, they might have spoken different tongues, but they would have understood each other perfectly. Both believed that human suffering begins when we lose sight of balance, when we chase what fades and ignore what endures. For the Stoic, the challenge is acceptance. For the Confucian, it is harmony. But acceptance and harmony are twins, different faces of the same calm heart. The East teaches the virtue of moderation. The West teaches the virtue of endurance. Together, they form a complete truth. To endure with grace and to balance with wisdom, that is the art of being human. Confucius taught people to bow to the Da, rhythm of heaven. Marcus Aurelius taught people to live according to nature. In both, there is no arrogance, only humility before life's order. And so, when Confucius said, "Do not stop," he was not only speaking to China, but to humanity. His wisdom crossed mountains and centuries, finding echoes in Stoic thought, in Buddhist compassion, in modern psychology. Because continuity, discipline, and peace are not Eastern or Western. They are human. And the soul that continues slowly, humbly, consistently is the same in Lu, in Rome, in every heart that listens. Every journey begins with a decision. But the journey of self-discipline begins with awareness. Confucius taught that before one can govern a household, a city, or a nation, one must first learn to govern the self. He saw discipline not as control imposed from the outside, but as harmony cultivated from within. It is not a rule book, it is a rhythm, a steady pulse of choices that slowly shape the soul. He once said, "When we see men of a contrary character, we should turn inwards and examine ourselves." This was his compass. The disciplined life, he believed, begins with reflection, the courage to look inward before judging outward. Every time he was challenged, he did not ask, "Who is wrong?" He asked, "What can I learn?" That is where discipline begins. And the humility to see oneself clearly. Confucius's own life was a long road of restraint and resilience. He faced exile, rejection, and poverty, but he never allowed bitterness to dictate his path. He walked steadily, not proudly. He taught with calm, not with anger. His life was not perfect, but it was ordered. And that order was his peace. Discipline was a practice of remembering who you are when the world tries to make you forget. The journey of self-discipline is not about punishment. It is about alignment, to bring your actions in harmony with your values in harmony with truth. That alignment does not happen in a day. It unfolds slowly, through routine, through silence, through repetition. Confucius believed that repetition was sacred. He said, "To study and not think is a waste. To think and not study is dangerous," meaning wisdom is not gained by extremes, but by balance, by combining thought and action, theory and practice, learning and living. This, he taught, is discipline, not doing more but doing rightly, again and again. The modern mind often fears repetition. It hungers for novelty, change, excitement. But Confucius saw beauty in repetition because it refines, it purifies, it builds. Like the potter shaping clay, each motion may seem the same, but every repetition brings form closer to perfection. Discipline, he believed, is devotion disguised as routine. You do not repeat out of boredom. You repeat out of faith. Faith that small acts create great character. In the journey of self-discipline, there are 3 gates: the gate of awareness, knowing what must change; the gate of intention, choosing to act rightly; the gate of perseverance, continuing when it becomes hard. The first gate opens with honesty, the second with will, the third with love, because true discipline is not sustained by force, but by affection for what is good. Confucius once said, "The man who moves a mountain begins by carrying away small stones." He was not speaking of labor, but of inner labor, the discipline of small, unseen acts that shape destiny. To wake up with purpose, to forgive when hurt, to return to virtue after failure. These are the small stones that move mountains. He understood that self-discipline is a long love affair with truth, and like all love, it requires patience. Modern life often teaches the opposite. It tells us that comfort is success and effort is suffering. But Confucius knew comfort without purpose becomes emptiness, and effort without meaning becomes burnout. So he taught the middle path, to work steadily but with awareness, to rest but not to drift, to strive but without violence against oneself. In Stoic Rome, Marcus Aurelius wrote, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, 'I am rising to do the work of a human being.'" Confucius would have agreed, because self-discipline is not self-denial, it is self-respect in action, to rise when tired, to speak truth when silence would be easier, to stay kind when anger tempts. These are the quiet victories of the disciplined. Soul discipline, for Confucius, was a form of peace. He did not separate the two. A chaotic mind breeds chaos in the world. A disciplined mind brings harmony to all things. He taught that the wise man does not wait for peace to come. He creates it through order, mindfulness, and devotion, and every act of order, every deliberate, conscious choice, is a prayer to life itself. The journey of self-discipline never ends. It is not a mountain to climb once, but a path to walk daily. Sometimes it feels silent, sometimes it feels slow, but every step taken with awareness leaves a trace of light behind. Confucius believed that if a person continues long enough with sincerity and humility, discipline transforms into grace, and grace, once born, flows quietly into the lives of others. That, he would say, is the invisible victory of the steadfast soul. The ancient words of Confucius echo quietly in a world that has forgotten how to pause. It does not matter how slowly you go, as long as you do not stop. In an age where speed is worshipped, this line feels almost rebellious. It whispers against the noise of urgency, reminding us that the direction of your steps matters more than their pace. Today we live in a culture that glorifies acceleration. Everything, information, news, opinions, success, must arrive instantly. We scroll through achievements as if life were a race to be seen, but beneath the rush, there is exhaustion. People move fast, yet feel lost. They achieve more, but rest less. They connect digitally, but disconnect spiritually. Confucius, if alive today, would not tell us to abandon technology. He would tell us to use it without becoming used by it. He would remind us the problem is not speed but forgetfulness, forgetting what truly deserves your attention. To apply his wisdom today means to redefine progress. Progress is not just forward motion, it is meaningful motion. To keep going slowly but consciously is more powerful than sprinting without purpose. Because meaning grows in slowness, in reflection, in patience, in persistence. The Confucian way is not about rejecting the modern world. It is about bringing soul into motion. In a society of notifications and distractions, discipline has become the new peace. Confucius would say, "He who conquers himself is the mightiest warrior." To apply that in modern life means to wake without rushing, to work with awareness, to speak with care, to rest without guilt. Self-mastery in the 21st century is not heroic grandeur. It is quiet consistency. Every moment you resist, mindless, scrolling, every time you choose focus over frenzy, you are walking the Confucian path, one calm breath at a time. Confucius taught that greatness is not built in grand gestures, but in daily rituals, the art of showing up, even imperfectly. He said, the expectations of life depend upon diligence. Modern diligence means something new, to protect your attention as a sacred resource, to set boundaries not out of fear, but out of love for your inner life. The world may tell you to do more, but Confucius whispers, do what matters, and do it well. His philosophy is not against progress, it is against chaotic progress. In the Confucian world, slowness was not laziness, it was depth. To go slow was to go with awareness. To stop was not to rest, but to abandon the inner journey. Thus, his teaching invites us to reclaim slowness as an act of strength, to walk slower, but truer, to think deeper, but kinder, to succeed outwardly without losing inward stillness. Confucius would have understood our age of burnout. He lived in political turmoil, chaos, uncertainty. He, too, saw people chasing power and forgetting virtue. Yet, he taught, the superior man is modest in his speech, but exceeds in his actions. If he were alive today, he might say, post less, reflect more, argue less, understand more. Do not rush to be seen, learn to be real. The ancient temples have become smartphones now. The scrolls have become screens, but the human heart remains the same. It still seeks peace, meaning, and connection. That is why Confucius remains modern, because he spoke to the timeless structure of being human. His advice was never for monks or kings alone. It was for anyone who breathes, struggles, and begins again. To apply his wisdom today is to live with intention, to move through each day, not as a reaction, but as a response. When you wake up, ask, what deserves my energy? When you work, ask, does this align with who I wish to become? When you rest, ask, is this rest restoring my soul or numbing my mind? Confucius would not want perfection. He would want presence. His message in the age of chaos is this: you can live slowly in a fast world. You can still be modern and mindful. You can succeed and still be serene. You can move forward without losing yourself. Every small act of integrity, every moment of awareness, every step taken without stopping is progress. Because progress, in its truest form, is not speed. It is the steady return to what makes us human.